This conference will now be recorded.
Hello.
Hello, Dorothea. How are you?
I'm good. How is everybody? We're just had a few technical difficulties. People should be at their spot in hopefully 1 minute.
I had a weak connection, so I'm hoping that everything works okay.
I'll be right back. I'm going to check on everybody.
Mary, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. Is everybody ready?
Yep. Okay, I'm here.
All right, I'll make a motion to call the meeting to order. Do I have a second?
Trustee Lanfair, second.
All in
Okay.
favor?
Roll call. Trustee Keating,
Eating aye.
Mayor Corby,
Corby, aye.
Trustee Stetser,
Stetser, aye.
Trustee Galusha. He doesn't have his headset on or his mic at the moment. Let's give him a second.
Give him a minute.
Trustee Lanfair,
Lanfair, aye.
Frank, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay,
We just voted to open the meeting, so I'm just going to ask you how you vote on that.
Trustee Galusha, aye.
Okay, meeting is open.
Okay. First item we have to revisit the bridge lighting. Did everybody get a chance to take a look at that?
Yes,
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
I have a couple questions when you're ready.
Go ahead, Renee.
When we talked about this before the state shut down, we said that originally the bridge work would be, or the lighting work as part of the bridge work will happen March 2021 to Labor Day 2021. So this begins in our next budget cycle. So the budget we're working on now. And originally we had planned to have the consultant work on, let's see, what line is that? A1440.4 in the budget, that engineering consulting line. We were going to have the lighting engineer look at it and give us a quote and then start the work in the next budget cycle. So I have my first concern is we don't have money to do this project now. And my second concern is where it will fall if DOT is running ahead and they are doing this lighting work at the beginning of their cycle in March, then we won't have the money. If they're doing it later in their project cycle, we might have a chance because it'll be in the next budget. So we don't currently have any of those scenarios laid out in that letter in our budget anywhere, unless it can fall under repairs and materials in the street maintenance budget. And I guess that's a question for you, Frank. Would that categorize? Right now we have in the street maintenance budget under repairs and materials, we have 30K in there. Would this type of project fall under that? Because it is upgrading the infrastructure.
I believe it would, yes.
Okay, then would there be enough in there? Oh, Mary's raising her hand. Maybe she has some answers. Oh, we can't hear you,
you're
Mary.
muted. Still muted.
You could write it on a piece of paper. We could read it out.
I'll unmute her.
She's put herself on permanent mute.
Yeah.
She's sending
I
us
think
a sign.
She's got a
She's
hardware
done.
problem. Barry, you've got something on your headset that is muted, a button on your chain on somewhere on there. Just so we're clear, it's $10,400 for the
You know
two.
what? I'm using it as a touch screen. What the heck? I can't do this. I'm getting too old for this stuff. All right, I couldn't get it because I was doing it as a touch screen and not as a mouse. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
All right, 1440.4 engineer contractual. We have 6,000 in the new year. We have 2450 left in this current fiscal year. So I'm not sure where this engineering work is going to fall. So that's question number one. The 30,000 under 5132.4.
Mhm.
Is it? No, 5110.4
Yeah, 5110.4, repairs and
Connect-
materials.
cannot be used for that because that is repairs and materials for our
Grove Street.
equipment,
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that would not come out of there. There is in the
Yes.
under page 7 under planning and consultants,
Yeah,
there's $8,000 there, so that it could come out of that money. The thing is, I don't know how much money you're talking about.
Well, it depends on which option we choose here.
We've got about 4,000 left in this year's budget. I don't know when the amount
We
of
don't-
money or the time frame.
Yeah,
So
and I
Mary,
don't know that,
Mary, 10,400.
Well, no, I didn't know it was either or. I think
no, it's
one
either or. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are two different choices. So under one, there's A and B, and then two is so they're two different. Either we do the bridge lighting that's on the bridge itself or under the bridge lighting. So those are our
bridge
two options.
We were talking about 10.4, Dorothea. Was that the number we were coming up with? Because I thought it was like 5,500 or something.
The way I read it, I thought you could choose both options, but I could be dead wrong. When you add option B, which is 4,700, which I thought the board had talked about adding 2 light poles, and the underbridge lighting, which I know you had talked about, it comes to 10,400. But obviously the board does have options.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and correct me, this is Trustee Stetzer, I keep forgetting to announce myself before I speak. And the mayor will probably know more about this, but we talked about if we did the under the bridge lighting, and then Zach was also looking at some options on the canal path, like a pole light. So
Street lighting.
Let me,
Fine.
Corby, let me just add to what Renee was saying. I believe what we had discussed before, Renee, is that it seemed that the cheapest way to accomplish light under the bridge might be to extend the circuit that feeds the lights at the East Pavilion and install one more pole light identical to the existing pole lights on Shane Place in a location where that light would actually spill. And there's plenty of real estate there where we could mount a pole. We'd have to trench over to get the electrical there, but we could put in one pole and it would light underneath the bridge.
So would that
This
mean
is
that
just-
we could go with option one and not incur additional costs with the DOT project?
Well, we could actually do that independent of DOT. I think the more sensitive issue in terms of coordinating with them is if we want to improve lighting on the bridge itself, on the for the State Street sidewalk on both sides of the bridge.
Right.
This Trustee Lampier, I want to understand then, Bob, what we're saying is that we do not need an engineer's report in order to install an additional light pole along Shane's Alley that would spill underneath the bridge and
Well,
accomplish.
you still probably want an engineer to do drawings because you're going to have to contract with somebody and you're going to want to make sure that they do it properly. So there still is some engineering cost, I would believe, associated. You're going to evaluate to make sure that the existing circuit can handle the light. I'm sure it can, but there will be a little engineering expense associated with that. But the other part is that doesn't necessarily have to be done in the near future because it could be done independently of the state's schedule. It's the other project that really is sensitive.
That ties in.
Right.
It's a
correct.
timing issue. Okay.
So this is Trustee Stetzer again. Mayor Corby, what do you have any idea where, if we were to choose one of these options that incurred additional cost, where the lighting would be in the cycle of the DOT resurfacing or rehabilitation project on that bridge?
Well, I think regardless of what happens, because I'm sure they've experienced some delay because of the stay-at-home work order, we'll have to recircle with them and figure out if their schedule has been adjusted to compensate for the delay that I'm sure has occurred in their planning.
Okay,
Is
I
there,
don't want to lock ourselves into something we can't afford if it's this budget cycle.
Well, that's why I'm saying if we break it in two and we really focus on the lighting above the bridge, which is the one that most likely will require being coordinated with their construction schedule.
Are we able to ask that, this is Trustee Keating, are we able to ask that they do this later in the project so that it is not a 2021, I'm sorry, 2021 budget item and is instead a 21-22 budget item?
I think for efficiency, you're gonna wanna do it when they do the bridge. I'm wondering if we could get a spec from Fairport. Fairport has some pretty nice guarded, well, what do they call them? They're kind of like bug jar lights on the lift bridge on Main Street. I mean, the DOT already has them on another bridge. If we could simply install those on the bridge over here, it seems like that would be a reasonable solution. They seem to favor having independent poles set in the sidewalk. Is that what you remember also, Renee?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, but I'm asking something entirely different. I'm asking, can we ask them that if we do this, it's essentially in next year's budget, so that we don't have to come up with $10,000 right now during a pandemic?
The problem is we don't know where, I don't know that we can tell them specifically when to do it because they're going to have to take the whole deck off the bridge, and it probably is whenever they get to that.
We're going to be subject to their schedule. If we do select lights that are mounted on a bridge, they're going to be repainting that entire bridge with 25-year paint, and they're not going to want to come back in later and install lights later on. So I think, I mean, we can find out what their schedule is, but I think if we're going to do it, we really do have to drop the hammer and make a decision now.
Okay, I would like us to ask them if it is, when it falls in the project, because it's more ideal for us if it's in next year's budget.
Well, I can make a call and try to find that out. And
Can I-
since we have a meeting next week, I'll get an answer for our meeting next week.
Excuse me,
Trustee Lanfair?
this is trustee Galusha. Mary, can you tell me that category street maintenance, A5110 to A5110.4, we've got 58,000 for equipment and 30,000 for repairs and material. It seems to me that $10,400 should fit somewhere in there, don't you think, Mary?
Not for that, no, because I'm accounting for consultant work out of 8020.42. A5110.2 for equipment, the 58,000 is for, and we might not spend this total amount, but that is for our
I'm sorry.
T450 and the Kubota.
Yes, I'm sorry. I forgot about that. What about repairs and materials?
Repairs and materials are for any other things that go wrong with our other equipment. This past year, 2018-19, we spent 29,000. We're at 20,000 as of the end of March. So we still have to book 2 more months into that. I suspect that total will come somewhat close to what we've had in the prior year. So 30,000 is probably a relatively fair number to have in there. And this was a number that we adjusted down already a couple of times. So that money can't come out of there.
And the lighting, oh, go ahead.
The light, no, that's okay. The lighting.
Street lighting, those line items, we've got for street lighting and repairs, 45,000 and 3,500. And I know that goes for the, I think we said that was a number, that was a hard number last meeting.
5182.4, where it says village-wide street lighting, that's the RG&E bills for just lighting our streets. It's just like your bill at home.
The repair number.
The repair number is for any bulbs that might break, it's from a windstorm. One street light itself is usually around $5,000-6,000. So that is not enough in that category for that purpose. That would be an item, let's say we fell through the year, that would be an item that we would have to pull out of contingency monies. But it would be better to have it built right into the budget right from go. I don't know where I would shift money from at this point, because we went through the dollars last time. In that planning budget for consultants, I had $8,000, of which I think we were looking at $4,700 to be used for bridge light design. Is that The number that you're looking at, I might be off on the number.
For the engineering specs, I mean, for the design part of it, right?
For the
Not the-
design part of it.
Yeah.
It was
Um,
4,700?
That's what, I believe that's the number Bob came up with, and
Yeah,
um,
That is correct.
that was
All
like
right.
6 meetings ago, but, and Zach actually brought in an estimate as well, that we used originally when we came up with the scenarios. So, and I think that's the scenario that Bob's talking about under the bridge that could be done independent of what the DOT is doing, I
Right.
believe.
Okay,
Okay.
maybe to help clear up some things, I should set up a new category like 8020.41 that says bridge, that your bridge project.
That
Pull
would be
out
good.
5,000 out of the 8,000 for the bridge, and then you have 3,000 left for any other kind of consultants.
I
And that
think
would,
the other item that was in that consultant category, I believe, was to start the work on South, not the design work on South. And Frank, you correct me if I'm wrong on that one. The
That was
consult-
yeah, there would be about $3,000 left
Yeah.
over for that.
Okay.
Additionally, I think we raised the category for engineer by 1,000 to take care of any engineering costs that might be what is it, in 1440.4. I've lost that page because now oh, here it is. In 1440.4, we raised the budget by $1,000 to 6,000 to take care of like a lighting engineering or whatever that would have been needed for that bridge project. Is that going to be enough money in there? Should I have a separate line item just for engineering for the bridge work in that category there? And then how much do you want me to put in there?
Trustee Lanfair. Bob, do you think there is any opportunity for a grant for the lighting on the bridge?
No,
There wouldn't be anything because
No.
state's
Um,
strapped.
there's just the state, any program that the state has, I don't know of any programs that exist right now that would fund something like that. And given the state's fiscal condition, I doubt they're going
Yeah,
to
that's
be
what I thought they were
any
strapped.
grant programs.
Trustee Lanfair, typically if we get any kind of grant, we always have to come up with a
Yeah,
matching
matching.
share. Matching share, it's been 50%, sometimes they're 25, but typically they're 50. So that's just another item to consider.
So we're talking about transferring it from the existing line for consultants, taking some of it and making another line item specifically for the bridge.
Mhm.
Under the planning section, where it says 8020.4, there's $1,000. 8020.41, I would call for the bridge project. And the project, and then under 8020.42, where it says consultants for 8,000, I would reduce that number to 3,000. So basically, you've got still the same amount of money,
You
only in
just
two
reduce it.
two separate categories, so you can track it better.
Right,
Okay.
okay. All right, everybody okay with that?
Okay, so
Uh,
which, so go ahead, Lily. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
I was just going to ask if somebody wanted to make a motion if that were the case.
I have one more question before we do that. So are we choosing then option number 1 in this
Mhm.
letter to DOT? And is
Yes.
and are we choosing then A or B?
On the bridge lighting.
That's right. We're saying that our preference is to have the lighting
the
that's
bridge
going to be done
lighting.
separately under the bridge on the canal path itself.
I think-
So
I
we're
think even when
choosing-
those
We would do
lights
that
were on,
separately.
I think people felt they weren't quite adequate for what's needed on the bridge. And I
Right.
think in our discussion, we really wanted something that lit the sidewalk. Those lights are high, they spray the light across the bridge, but they don't do a great job lighting the sidewalk.
Right, but we're not going to we're choosing bridge of this letter that you need to respond to DOT. We have 2 choices, and the first one is bridge lighting. So we're going to choose option number 1, but then we have 2 choices under that.
And I'm thinking we want B, don't you, Renee?
We do. And it depends on where it falls. That's 4,700 to do the work itself. In addition to what we just talked about with the engineering specs ahead of time.
Yep.
So, okay, so we're choosing option 1B then. Okay.
Okay, everybody all right with that?
And not 2.
And not 2, we can defer that because we don't need to involve them. We'll just install our own light pole independent of everything they do.
Okay.
Okay? Someone want to make a motion? I'll make a motion to authorize option 1B as included in the DOT memo dated, Brian Till dated, whatever the date that is.
Let me see if I can find a date on it.
I don't see a date on it.
I don't either.
Yeah. Okay, the DOT memo from Brian Till regarding proposed lighting enhancements for the State Street Bridge. Do I have a second?
Trustee Lanfair, second.
Okay.
Okay,
Vote.
roll call. Trustee Keating,
Keating, aye.
Mayor Corby,
Corby, aye.
Trustee Lampier,
Lanfair, aye.
Trustee Stetser,
That's our aye.
Trustee Galusha.
Trustee Galusha, aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, next item we have is a review of the settlement agreement. Maybe we can just quickly go through the comments from Hodgson Russ to questions that Dan sent them.
Is this something we do in an executive session? Given that we don't know who's on and this is a legal matter? And how would we do an executive session would we do it as a separate call maybe?
I'd have to
We
set up a
could-
separate meeting.
And save it to the end and ask everyone to leave and do an executive session? It just feels weird to be
Do you
talking
think
about a
the items
settlement.
are that sensitive? We've already approved making the agreement and we're really down just to, dotting i's and crossing t's.
No. There's quite a lot to talk about in there. Specifically, the differences between paragraph 3 and paragraph 6, one of which gives quite a lot of rights and one of which takes away rights.
Yeah,
And
they
it's
seem
very
in
complicated.
conflict. Yeah, those two
Yeah.
paragraphs seem.
Okay, all right. Well, Dorothea, do we have a way of doing executive session?
As Dan said, we could wait to the end and have everybody leave, or I can set up another room and we can, another room for us to go to, a private room. It would take me a few minutes.
Do you want to pause and allow Dorothea to do that? I think we should take care of this because it is coming down to the end.
Do we
Well,
want to
can,
do it at
but-
the end of the meeting?
Yeah, let's just do it at the, I vote we do it at the end. And then we don't have to set up a separate room. And go and leave and then come back, that's a mess. From a technical standpoint, the better way is to get through our thing, ask everyone to go, and we just stay on and have the conversation about the legal matter.
Well, we've got to, if we approve it, we have to come out of executive session anyway, so. All right, moving on to the budget.
Okay. I redid the numbers that we went through the other evening in all the categories that you've mentioned. I came up now with a shortfall of 4133, which that money could be taken out of the contingency account, which is already low. It would drop it down to about 22,000, which as even just from tonight's conversations, talking about this bridge lighting and whatever, there would have been money that would have been coming out of that category. So that number is low. And then the other number that was in consideration was the Hodgson line item number, which is, I changed to 25,000. So other than that, that's where we are.
Yeah.
I'll turn that over
that's
to the
what jumped out.
trustees.
That's what jumped out at me. So it's 1420.41 coming in at, here, let me share my screen real quick. So we're all looking at the same thing. Okay, go. That. Okay, so what we're talking about is this line item here, which yesterday or on Tuesday was at 80, and now it's at 25. And so this one, we think we're going to get a bill from them for 140 on top of the 17, which puts us at 157 for the year on an estimate of 100, with 2 more months in the fiscal year to go. So that 157 will likely grow from there, getting us closer to, call it 160, 170, somewhere in there. Basically the same as the prior year. So we had 2 years ago, we had it at 162. This year, our estimate is about 160, 170, 180, somewhere in there. I just don't see how we go down to 25. I wasn't comfortable at 80, let alone 25. So the other things I really want to highlight here is that this year, when it came in at 161, Hodgson Russ's estimate was 100, and that's what we budgeted. So they were off by 62%. This year, when it's going to come in at 170, call it, their estimate was at 100, and they missed it by 70%. These are massive numbers. I am simply not comfortable with 25. I wasn't even comfortable with 80. What I'm comfortable with is 170. And yes, I don't even want to talk about how we would pay for that. I just want to focus on accurate estimates. We have heard from them for the last 3 years that it's going to get cheaper, it's going to get cheaper, it's going to get cheaper, and it hasn't. I also look at what we did in 2019, 2020 from them, and there really wasn't that much that we did. We had that meeting at Sutherland, and there was some prep work in that, and there was some follow-up in that. Bob had them write a couple of press releases. There were a couple of findings by the court, but there was, and then there was the negotiation around Friends of Pittsburgh Village suing us. They've missed by a ton. I cannot see that we would accept a $25,000 amount from them when we have spent 170 each of the last 2 years. My proposal is that we keep it at 170 and budget accordingly.
All right, well, I had a lengthy conversation with Chuck Malcolm yesterday. Right now, there's 3 cases left. You have to look at what happened. And, you know, there have been many twists and turns because of the idiosyncrasies of the Court of Justice Arc. Last year, there was significant amount of money that was expended for the hearing that there's no way to plan for something like that because it was an illogical decision from Judge Arc. It's hard to predict things like that because he ruled in favor of FOPV, but then still fined the village. It didn't make, his ruling didn't make any sense. Right now, there's 3 cases left. There's the LWRP case, which Judge Arc has not made a decision in. That was submitted by Mindy Zoglin representing the PZBA. There will likely be appeal. The appeal will have to be filed sometime in the second part of this year. We have $25,000 or $30,000, I think, in there to cover that. Is that right, Mary?
Yes, that is correct.
There's the next case is the original case from FOPV challenging the issuance of the special permit. In that case, we're on the side of Mark IV. It's possible that Friends of Pittsford Village may appeal that case, but we don't have a stake in that. We've settled with FOPV. It really doesn't matter to us how it comes out. That's something between FOPV and PCP. There's no reason to throw any more money at it. And then the last case is the HPB. Hodgson Russ has already prepared an exhaustive brief on that case, which we've all read last year. That needs to be submitted. And according to the memo that Chuck Malcolm sent all of you, that's 22,500. I put 25,000 in there because just understanding that we have to pad it with memos, press releases, or whatever other miscellaneous things happen in the year, we need enough to do that. At 4 o'clock today, we finally got all the bills from Hodgson Russ. And what's the total, Mary, of what we owe Hodgson Russ? And this may not incur work that's occurred within the last 2 weeks, but it should cover most everything else. How much was that?
162,000.
$162,000. So we know we need a payment plan for Hodgson Russ. We've talked to them. They're amenable to accommodating us on a payment plan. The question is, you know, how much do we want to pay towards that in the upcoming year? And given the uncertainty of that everything that's happened with the 9.9 tax increase, do we want to stay there, or do we want to do as Dave Ferris has suggested, and go with something higher that will, you know, in years past, we've had a fund balance to rely on. We don't have that to dip into right now. And so there's an argument to be made in talking to Mary, who's managed our finances for 20 years. The responsible thing would be to go higher and get enough revenue to get us through this year, and also contribute something so that our fund balance remains intact and that we pay down and reduce some of the liability from Hodgson Russ.
Yeah, and Bob, I hear everything you're saying there, and it is the responsible thing. I want to separate how are we going to pay for it from the discussion of what should the estimate be. Let's worry about how to pay for it after we come to a complete decision as to what that number should be. I just, you know, so this is even higher than they talked about. So they're going to give us a bill. They just gave us a bill for 162, right? Is that what you said? On top of the 17 that we've already spent. So we're already at 180 with a couple months to go. We're going to crack 200 for the year. They estimated 100. And we cannot continue to just take their word for it, budget with what they tell us, and then have them blow by it with no consequence and believe what they say the next time they budget. It's madness. If I am adamant that 25K number has to go way up, because as you said, there are 3 open, nothing's changed. There's 3 cases that are open, and we're going to budget 2,500, which is an 85% reduction from where we were. And we have 3 cases open. If you want to bump it down to 25 when all this is done, sure. But I mean, 25K when remember this. Here are the last 3 years: $240,000, $162,000, and $200,000, and we're going to go to 25. That is not responsible budgeting.
This is Trustee Galusha. That's not the issue. The issue is, if we put the full legal bill, the 164,000 on that line, we can expect to meet the controller sometime in June, because we would have a negative budget. We're out of business. That's not the purpose for putting 25,000 in there. The legal bill for 164, as we talked about the last meeting, we were going to talk to the lawyers about extending that over a long-term agreement. That would take it out of the current liability. That would take it out of line item A1420. And that's why the 25,000 is in there. The 25,000 covers the legal expense that Bob just explained. The other 164, we'd have to negotiate with them as a long-term obligation that would not appear here.
Frank, I hear you. You're mixing up a cash flow issue and a budgeting issue. I'm not talking about how to pay for the 164. We'll figure that out. What I'm talking about is budgeting for 2020 and 2021. At 25K, is preposterous. When our last 3 years have been 240, 162, and 200. Let's take that. Let's take your 160 and how we'll pay for it, and what kind of terms and which line item it goes on. Let's take that out of the equation.
Well,
I just want to talk about that
well,
25K
if we're gonna
number. I
if we're
can't
gonna
see.
drill into this, then what? One case, there are two pending cases because one case we're not involved in, we don't have to spend any money on. So there are two cases. We have money for Mindy for one. We have money allocated for Hodgson Russ for the other. Okay, what are you anticipating as potential additional expenses that you think we need to cover, Dan?
I'm just looking at history. In our last 3 years
You
of
can't
history
just
has
look at
been
history.
massive.
You've got to look at the detail of the progression of the cases and what's happened legally.
And guys,
I've
with all
taken
due respect,
to sit
I'm
with
sorry,
the
Bob.
attorneys, excuse me, I'm speaking.
Yeah.
To sit with the attorneys, to really drill into this, to understand what's at stake, what's the worst thing that could go wrong at this, so we don't go over. I mean, I can't make an argument to budget for something that we don't think will happen. We're in an entirely different situation than we were a year ago because we really are winding down to the appeals of the last two cases. We're assuming that Judge Ark will rule against the village in both of these because he seems to have a bias to do that. And we have budgeted for, we don't even know if the cases will be appealed, but we're assuming the worst case that they will be appealed and trying to cover that cost.
Right. And what I'm suggesting, Bob, is that your discussions with the attorneys who have been 100% wrong and 70% wrong over the last 2 years. Like that's awful. We shouldn't take a word they say.
Well,
We should
So
look at
Dan-
what the average.
so Dan,
Go ahead, Renee.
So this is Trustee Stetser. So Dan, your concern is that based on our historical attributions, or we've been missing the mark. So they tell us in the past 3 years, I don't know how many years you looked at, that the estimate was this, and we didn't. We came in above and beyond it. So you're saying we should follow that. You would like to have more money in there, regardless of what cases are pending, just because you think it's going to come in higher based on history?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
In a nutshell.
Dan, what would you suggest for a number for those lines?
I don't know. I mean, double it. They've been 100% wrong the last 3 years. You know, so double it. And then we'll have to adjust the taxes and other expenses accordingly. It's just we have been caught blind the last 3 years by this, and we're just gonna keep doing it the same way. I don't understand it.
Well,
and Mary, you know better than anybody.
Was because we attempted to settle with.
Hold on, Bob.
I'm hearing,
And they
Bob,
negotiated in
still
bad
talking.
faith.
Bob,
I'm hearing
still
two people. I'm hearing two people.
I'm still talking, Bob. Mary, you know better than anybody. When we budget 100 and it comes in at 200 as an actual, that creates massive problems for us and where to find money and robbing Peter to pay Paul. And that's why our fund balance is so low and all of that. So I'm just looking for us to responsibly budget this.
That's fine. I'm good with that. I just would need to have, what is the number that you would like to see? And if the board is in agreement with that number, to put into this category.
I mean, truthfully, the number I'd like to see is 170 because that's what it's been the last 3 years. But I know I'm not going to get that from. Well, it's not fair to say that it's 25 because it's 25 plus Mindy's portion, which is, call it 20, and the L and 30. It really is 70.
So Dan, can you pause for a second? I want to go back to something. This is Trustee Stetser again. Something that Frank said earlier. If we work out a long-term payment plan with Hodgson and Russ, that's still real costs to us, but over time. So if they were to come in at 160 this year, we would pay part of it this year and part of it next year is what you're saying, if we come up with a payment plan, but we don't have that yet. So what would be a number that you'd be comfortable with based on what we know, Frank?
Are you asking me?
I am.
I think Bob Corby answered that. Bob Corby talked to the lawyers
Okay.
and they gave Bob a projection of what legal work they would be doing next year. And based on that projection, there was a $25,000 number put in there. Now, historically, yes, Dan, they've been off, but to say let's put $170,000 in that line item because they were off the past 2 years, and I don't know why I'm going to put the number in. I don't have anything to substantiate it other than they were wrong the last 2 years. That makes no sense to me.
Okay, what
And
number?
This is trustee Lanfair.
Frank,
May I
what
just
number are you
interject,
comfortable with?
please?
Go ahead, Lily.
Thank you. Also, when you're looking at the cases, we're just talking about Hodgson Russ, their bill. We have separate line items for Mindy and separate line item for Jeff. So we're talking specifically about Hodgson Russ. If you were to realistically raise their estimate, if they were say, well, they were wrong by 50%, then the reasonable number to put there would be about $45,000. Then that's specifically for Hodgson Russ. We're not talking about the other two cases. They have one case that they would be involved in next year, one case. And it's a rehash of all the other cases. So it's no new briefs. Everything is, all the research is done. And that's what they're basing their number on. If I'm incorrect, Bob, please correct me.
The reason I think we're covered is because there's some debate as to whether Mindy's case, the LWRP case, would occur next year. I had conflicting opinions when I talked to Mindy and when I talked to Hodgson Russ. So to be on the safe side, we put in $30,000 to cover the scenario, but that money could potentially be added to if Hodgson Russ went over to take care of that. So I think we have been conservative in trying to come up to make sure we have enough in the category to cover a worst case scenario.
Bob, I agree with you. Yeah, and Lily, I had just addressed that really what we have in the budget is 70 for PCP, because you've got the 25 for Hodgson Russ, you got Mindy's, and then you got the HPRB. Add those together, they're about 70. I don't.
There's
I
also
don't
another
think we have- hold on,
$18,000.
Bob, I'm still talking. I don't think we've been conservative, Bob. They gave us an estimate of 22.5. They've been 100% wrong every year. Frank, let me ask you this. A contractor comes to your house, they do 3 jobs. The first job, they are 70% off of their bill. They charge you 70% more. The second job, they charge you 100% more. And they come in for the third. Are you gonna take their word for it?
I think the difference in that scenario is that a contractor is fully responsible for the management and orchestration of the work. When you're working in this scenario and you're dealing with the appellate court, you're dealing with an unpredictable applicant, and you're dealing with a judge that seems to be compromised. So, you know, and the whole issue of a settlement process that was not fruitful because the applicant didn't negotiate in good faith. So it's a more complex scenario, and that's the difficulty that's happened in the projections that have been made.
And
But-
Bob, sorry, finish.
No, I'm done. Go ahead,
Okay.
Dan.
And Bob, I totally agree with that. And it's the complexity and the unpredictability that we're not budgeting for. So we're taking a volatile situation and we're trying to assign this sort of static budget to it. It just doesn't make any sense. It has been unpredictable. Judge Ark has been unpredictable. PCP has been unpredictable. If anything, its unpredictability has been predictable. And we are not predicting that. We're not budgeting for it. We're budgeting for things to be smooth, and nothing in this project has been smooth. So if you're asking me what number I would like to see from Hodgson Russ, I'd really like to double it. I'd like it to be a lot more. I think. we
So
would
you'd
be-
like 140,000?
No. That's what I'd like. What I'll accept from Hudson Russ is 50
For that line item, you mean?
for that line item.
Yeah.
Because we also have Mindy in there and we also have Osborne in there.
So
Yes,
Mary, what
separate lines.
tax increase would be required to provide another $25,000 in the Hodgson Russ?
You would have to go up to at least 13,000. 13%, 20 for another 23,000. This is wrong. Oops. Somewhere between 13 and 14%. I've got a number on this sheet that's wrong. On the 14% line.
So our shortfall would be, with the four that we already exist, what we're talking about is about $30,000, to give it a round number, that we would be
Yes.
looking for a
Yep.
tax increase.
Correct.
That was trustee Lampier.
That would be correct.
Okay, thank you. So
Wait
I
a minute.
think, okay, what?
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Frank. Go ahead.
So what you're talking about, Dan, is that number, that line item should be 50,000, is that what you're saying?
That's what you're
Yes.
advocating.
And look, I'm making that up. If you want to change it, go for it. But
You just don't feel there's enough padding, right?
1420.41.
No, the question was, what number would you suggest in that line item for Hodgson Russ?
50.
I'm sorry?
50
50, he said.
So you're saying that number should go from 25 to 50,000?
at the least. I'm sorry, I don't believe a word they say in terms of their predicting. They've been terrible at it.
Comments from
So-
everyone else?
So Mary, that would put our fund balance at roughly a shortfall of 30,000, an additional 25 plus the 4,133. Is that right, Mary?
Correct.
That's what I just said. Yep.
So we'd have a shortfall of $30,000.
That's correct.
And that does not include the $164,000 that we owe the law firm. additionally.
Correct.
That would be in that long-term agreement.
That's
Correct.
correct.
So Frank, can you go a little deeper on that? So how do you envision that working? So part of that would hit our budget for 2021?
No, right, Mary?
Right.
The first installment would be 21, 22.
Okay.
Now, this idea is that if we were to do this with them, that to keep that item off the budget, we'd have to have a long-term agreement with them to pay the balance. Because we don't know what our year-end number is going to be, we would meet again in June to determine what the final settlement agreement would be and how we were going to pay it. Would it be over a year, 2 years, 3 years at the maximum, I would think. But because we don't have enough information yet, we would just wait until June. Plus, we don't know if anything is going to come through from the government. We may be able to reduce some of our budget items so we could apply more towards what we owe them. So that's the idea. That's the basic idea.
So let me throw something else out here. So, you know, there's no harm in doing what Dan suggests, because if we don't spend the money, we can always flip it over into contingency or many of the other categories that are cut tight. And so, you know, if we're padding it there, whether we pad it there or we pad it in the contingency, which really we have a contingency that's far below what is recommended. But if we're going to cover that additional cost, perhaps we should consider what Dave Ferris has suggested, that we raise the tax rate to something like $4.80 per thousand, which would yield another $149,000 of revenue in our budget. If we're going to add that, obviously we've got to cover the revenue from somewhere. So that's the next part of this conversation, is where do we get the revenue?
This is
Lily?
Trustee Lampier. Thank you. I'm just wondering if that money that you're proposing, that you're earmarking, so to speak, just in case for Hodgson Russ, given the history, could that be placed in a contingency fund?
It could.
And be pulled, and then that would keep our contingency fund from being so low?
Mary, I don't think it matters where we put it, does it?
That is correct. It doesn't matter where we put it. If we put it into a contingency fund, into like 1990.4, the danger with having it sit in that particular fund is that throughout the year, as you may be going through your projects and you're finding a shortfall in things that you haven't planned, the idea will be is, oh, we have money in the contingency, let's pull it away. I personally would have put the money directly into the Hodgson line and absorb it that way. If it doesn't materialize, it falls at the end of the year into our fund balance. So there's no, danger in losing it that way. The other thing I wanted to just say, Bob, because you had mentioned the $149,000 figure. If we raised our taxes to the 4.80, that's 149,000 over what our levy was from the year prior. So right now we are absorbing into this budget approximately 74,000. So it would be an additional 75,000 that we would put to this end in this
Which we
budget.
could use as a down payment to pay off the liability from Hodgson Russ.
That is correct. That would work.
Okay.
I think, there's a tendency, and over the years, many of the various village boards have always focused on the year finances, but I think we also have to consider the long term. And because of the legal assault from PCP, we've reduced our fund balance significantly. We don't have that cushion. We've also incurred a fair amount of debt. The Alan Knopf agreement, the sweeper, the pickup truck, the bond, and the payments for Hodgson Russ. So to give us a realistic chance to dig out of this hole, if we did go to given the uncertainty of the year, perhaps that is the wise decision.
And Bob, I would agree with that if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. That's the part that's gnawing at me.
Well, that's the part that's gnawing at me. I agree with you, Dan. And I think, the more that we're hearing recently of, the doctor's predictions of what might happen, there's even more uncertainty that, in the last week, nobody is clear what's going to happen. And we certainly can't bank on federal aid, because that is anything but a certainty. So the key thing is, our goal here is to deliver services efficiently to our residents. But it's not just this year. We also have to think about the next 5, the next 10 years. And if we so saddle the village with debt, we greatly reduce our efficiency, because we have to expend a significant part of the budget on the debt service. So I'm also thinking that, bite a sour pill and really confront the problem and reduce the problem later on, so the healing happens more quickly and the overall cost to our residents over the next 5 years is greatly reduced.
Yeah, I could get behind that in a different year. I can't in this year. it doesn't feel like the right year to clean up past debt problems, past bad decisions in budgeting. So,
Well, I don't think it's just about cleaning up last year. The other part of this is in the past years, when we've had a deficit, we've always been able to dip into the fund balance. We don't have that cushion right now. And the level of uncertainty that we're facing in the economy is unprecedented in our lifetimes. We've never experienced anything like this. Nobody, economists or medical personnel, are confident in what might happen and how long the downturn might last. We know the first 2 quarters are going to be bad. We know that. What happens after that is anybody's guess. If we underestimate how much revenue we need to operate, we don't have anywhere else to go other than to issue a bond, which only makes the situation worse. So I think it's something that we all need to think thoroughly about, not just what's happening this year, but how are we going to deal with this next year, the year after that, and the year after that.
Excuse me, trustee Galusha. Mary, we would go from a tax rate, is it $3.90? No, last year's rate. What was last year's rate?
3.9999 or $4.
3.99, and we would go first with the 9.9% increase. What would our
That
tax
would-
rate be?
That would have been 4.395 per thousand.
4.395, and that would be roughly $103 if for a house that is assessed at 265,000.
You have in your packet this sheet that gives you an idea of what the incremental changes would be. Tentative tax rate, it's at the very last page of that packet. It says what our tax rate is for somebody whose house is at 265 per thousand, and then it increments 10, 12, 15, 18, and 20%. It'll give you an idea.
Okay,
Everybody have that
Yes.
as reference?
I
Okay,
do.
all right. Go ahead, Frank.
so what are you proposing, Bob?
Well, I would propose a 4.80 tax increase. I think in terms of the spectrum of villages that are very similar to us, it's not out of line. We've had a tax rate that's been too small for years, which has been part of the problem. The other part of the problem is over the years, I've had many village boards that have ignored Mary's advice. I spent a lot of time with Mary over the last week going back and forth through all these numbers. And I've asked Mary for her advice because she's managed this for 20 years. And that was her recommendation. And I'm agreeing with Mary, our treasurer. I'm going to take her advice, and I agree with that position. I'm asking for input from the rest of you. That's how I feel personally. I think that's the most responsible thing we could do at this point, given all the factors that we have to balance here.
This is trustee Lanfair. Mary, do you also have the figures? I know it's on another sheet that you gave us, but at the proposed 4.80, what does that translate to for the average $245,000 assessment in the village? Is that about 205?
it's
So I
on this-
have this sheet here. You should have this.
Yeah,
yeah,
but
it's
I have,
well, it's
The
a
There's
very
one-
last one in your
There's one
packet.
for, it's the last one in your packet. There's a house in there for 242,500. It would be 194.02.
No, it's
increase.
a 20% increase. So
Yeah.
you have to go to the last column. Is it the 212.03 or 194? Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right, Mary. Sorry. It's sideways in my packet.
You can rotate it counterclockwise.
Uh,
Or you
yeah,
could
so
just keep
call it-
tilting your
call it
head if you
200
want.
bucks. So it's a 20% tax increase, and on the average family, it is another $200.
Now,
Yes.
that,
per year, yeah.
excuse me, trustee Galusha. So that would net us 75,000 roughly, right, Mary? In
Additional,
additional revenue,
an additional.
which doesn't cover the legal expense. So we'd still have to enter into an agreement with the attorneys.
That is correct. The other thing I just wanted to point out to the board, and I think you may know this, it's just as a reminder, the, whatever we put out there as a tax levy, that is 100% money coming back to the village. Whatever that money is, whatever that dollar amount is, that we will absorb. All other revenue items within that revenue sheet that you see before you are volatile. We may or may not get it at that amount. We may go lower, we may go higher. I've already adjusted 20% down for the sales tax. The sales tax may be another 10%. We don't know. It's too volatile at this point. We do know it's going to tank for the first half of the year. Not sure if the third quarter will be okay, but I don't know. So we need to, make some concessions for it. We have to operate on a business, operate the business on some sure funds, and that is our only place for sure funds. Everything else is tanking. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
Thank you.
Can I, the trustee Stetzer, ask a question that we visited before? Is it possible, 20% decrease in sales tax sounds a little optimistic to me. I'm worried it is going to come in below that. And we talked about not knowing if we will get any federal aid or what that would look like. So if we were to do the 4.8 increase, and then partway through the year, we are given some federal aid or aid in some form, can we offer a rebate to our taxpayers? Is that something
Dorothy,
that we?
That is a question that Dorothea could best answer.
Okay.
No, we can't do a rebate. The only thing I could suggest is that you would take a look at the following year's taxes. But again, any extra like that could be added to your fund balance and provide more stability. So, what you do with the following year taxes is up to you.
I would suggest if we did get a windfall and that happened, Renee, that we commit today to use that money to either pay down the liabilities that we have, which would also remove the interest payments for something like the bond, or add it to the fund balance, one of the two.
Or reduce taxes the following year by that amount.
That's
That's another opportunity next year, Dan. And if we get through this year in decent fiscal shape, we'll actually have the opportunity to do that. I would agree.
Okay, but I would want to commit to that. Because, here, let me finish this thought. I really like what Trustee Stetzer is saying. She's saying, look, if we end up getting money from the federal government to offset the decrease in sales tax, we're going to have a surplus, and we've just raised taxes on our folks by 20%. So how do we get that money back to them? Well, we can't send them a check, but we could commit to whatever we get from the federal government then is offset the next year in people's taxes. I could really get behind that.
My only hesitancy with that is there's just so much uncertainty that I hate to make a commitment like that, because none of us have a crystal ball what's going to happen over the next 12 months.
I have one other question, Trustee Stetzer again. We talked about if we do have to go with a higher tax increase, higher percentage, what about the residents who really are under an economic strain, which is many, many, many people in this community right now? What sort of payment plan can we set up? And I do realize that puts more pressure on Dorothea and Mary, the village staff, because they'll have to handle this. And what sort of guidelines do we have? Have we ever done that?
Since you're not set up to take multiple payments for the taxes, that would have to be a local law, and it's a little too late to do that since I have to have taxes out by the end of May. Given penalties for late payments, that's all under comptroller. If we don't collect them, we would be in trouble with them. So unless they give us guidance to allow us to extend payments out, my hands are kind of tied to penalizing late payments. If a person doesn't pay their tax bill, it ends up going to the county and it becomes a liability on their county tax bill. And then we're reimbursed from the county for that amount. Whether they incur additional penalties or whatever at that point is on the county. So again, I think this is guidance we need from the governor's office, the state comptroller, if they're going to allow us to do that. Our hands are tied on those matters because we would be penalized or, talked to from the comptroller's office for not collecting the penalties, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense.
Yeah,
It does.
if we had past year set it up to accept installment payments, that would be one thing, but we have not. We've done one payment and it's done and you get the penalties.
Is it worth a?
Excuse me, trustee Galusha here. Renee, to expand on your question, if a taxpayer cannot pay their tax bill, it does go to the county, but the county has, I want to say it's a department that actually administers payment plans. So a person could contact the county and say, could I have a payment plan? So they do have a way to do that, but not through the village, through the county.
They can do that in anticipation of not being able to pay so that that doesn't impact their credit rating and things like that, or is it technically?
No,
debt collection sort of
I don't
thing?
think so. I think it has
Okay.
to go through the process that the tax bill is referred to the county and it goes on the county rolls, and then the county would then that taxpayer would have to contact the county about setting up a payment plan. Unfortunately, I think their name would appear in the paper. There's a list of people that don't pay their county taxes every year. Sometime in the summer, the county publishes that list.
Dorothy, or somebody, is it worth a phone call to the controller's office to ask, what kind of relief can we offer?
We can always put that phone call out
That'd be great.
and see if there's anything coming down the line. I was waiting to see if they did anything with the tax bills being delayed or anything, and nothing has come out. NICOM says they're not issuing any changes for us, so we're kind of stuck. But I'll be happy to make that phone call and give the board the information.
That would be great. Thank you.
Do we have any more discussion regarding the 4.8? This is trustee Lanfear. Is that the figure that we will attempt to work with now?
I would consider going down to maybe $4.72.
What's the
That will
difference?
still cover us?
What's the difference between 472 and 48? Was there some logic there?
Well, I'm just, 20% is a lot, and staying under that, I think it's not quite as catastrophic. It still yields us a fair amount of revenue, but it keeps us under 20%. I think it's responsible.
It's a difference of 20,000 in revenue.
That's
I'm sorry, I missed it. That is 18%. It would bring us $60,000 additional.
I'm just throwing that out there as a compromise.
I don't feel better or worse about that. I feel exactly the same.
I feel a little better. The 4.8
seems
yeah.
This
This is a no-win situation.
is. It absolutely
There's no
is.
easy choice here, Renee. You're right.
Well, the only thing we haven't discussed, and I'm still doing research on it, I've been doing research with NICOM, I've been doing research on the web, is how unemployment works for our staff. So there is still an option of layoffs and furloughs which would allow us to reduce expenses and reduce services. I still think that's worth talking about. I don't like it, but I think it's worth. I don't think we fully
The
explored
thing
that.
I'm afraid of is we've got 20 catch basins that are in a state of collapse that, you know, if we don't get that work done this year, we're creating a labor hole that will be very difficult to get out of with the size of our crew. So, you know, we have, one of the things we have done over the last 6 years is we've cut staff. We really have a bare bones operation. So I just don't see, you know, if we're going to get anything done this year and provide even a minimal level of service, I don't know how we can furlough or cut staff. And I can't imagine who we would cut.
I don't see that happening either. Trustee Galusha here. Keep in mind also that whether we go to the 20% or the 18% tax increase, we're still going to have a negative number unless we enter into an agreement with a law firm to make some of their debt long-term.
And
We
I
still
agree
are
with
going
that.
to have that.
Yeah, we're in agreement with that, Frank. We understand that, as trustee
Okay.
Lampier. So this is trustee Lampier. We all understand that these are extraordinary times, and none of us want to make this very difficult decision. But I think at the end of this, what we try to keep in mind is the overall good and health of the entire village. And that's what we're focused upon. It's very, very hard, and everybody would like to wear the white hat. But I, for one, am willing to make the decision, a very difficult decision, to either endorse either an 18 or 20%, whatever the majority would feel acceptable. So in order to maintain a village, to have a village going forward. Otherwise, I don't see how we could possibly continue as the village of Pittsford. And that is what I'm most concerned. And I know it's difficult. It's difficult for everyone. And especially when we're feeling so stressed about health issues in our families and our own homes going forward and our own jobs going forward. And I don't mean the village job. I mean our regular real life jobs outside of these. We understand that these are very difficult times and we're all going to be making sacrifices. So we hope that we are thinking about the village as a whole and that most villagers would support this very difficult decision that we have been forced to make.
Well, I agree, Lily. Well said.
This is trustee Stetzer again. Can we revisit something Dan brought up about recognizing that, like, if we knew we were going to get some assistance, we would be able to go for a lower tax increase. Right now, we're assuming no assistance, no aid. I would like to revisit the idea of some sort of not promise, but a discussion about lowering.
An aspirational statement, a philosophical statement that, you know, we're dealing with extraordinary times. If things improve, then we will take measures to, you know, reduce the tax rate. And
For this next year, for the following year then.
I mean, I think all would agree with that, Renee. I don't think there's anyone here who wants the high tax rate.
No, that's true.
We're just faced with a myriad of bad choices and we're up against a wall. We really are.
Renee, will you finish your thought, please?
It wasn't a very well-formed thought, so my apologies. But Dan brought it up earlier, some sort of statement that we would, if we get state aid, and of course we don't know, or federal aid, whatever form it will be, we don't know. but that we would try to lower, or I guess we can't say we're going to lower taxes the next year, but somehow compensate for the fact that we had to raise it because we don't know right now what
Could
if we'll
I
get
make
any
a
aid.
stab at something, Renee? And you
Yeah,
can.
so it's not a well-formed thought. I'm having a hard time articulating what Dan
Let me
said.
try. In the event that we receive federal or state aid to offset the revenue losses that we are projected to experience, we will use that revenue to restore the financial situation and, if possible, reduce the tax rate in the following year, if conditions allow. I think we don't want to lock ourselves in because, again, we don't know what's going to happen. But I think, we're not trying to be financially irresponsible here. We're trying to be as prudent, transparent, and efficient as possible with the taxpayer dollars that we receive.
I'm with you on all of that, except hedging around. You're kind of hedging around, restoring financial. I want us to be explicit that the intent is to reduce taxes by a equal amount in the next year.
Well, my fear is you never want to hamstring yourself with a commitment that you don't know that you can do. And whether it's our board or whether there's a new makeup on a board a year from now, it just is irresponsible because we don't know what the conditions will be. So we have to be careful about making statements that we can't follow.
Totally get it. And let's wordsmith it and maybe write it and kind of edit it as a team, because that's something I can get behind, because essentially here is the story that we were telling the people of the village. And Lily, I disagree with you that the people of the village are going to accept this. I think they're going to be really upset by it. I think the story is, look, we know that we're not going to get the sales tax revenue that we were going to get. And there is no commitment from the federal government that we're going to get bailed out. We think we might. And if we do, then our intent is to pass that on in savings in the following year, should conditions allow.
Well, the other thing I would say, Dan, is we all have a leadership responsibility here to do our part to explain this to our residents so that it isn't, so that it's understood as best we can, and to do that honestly and transparently.
You all said it way better. I was beating around the bush trying to, I should have just handed it over.
We're all a team here, Renee.
I'm extremely nervous about this budget, if you can't tell.
Oh, yeah.
None of us are comfortable with it.
Adding to
all
the
are.
anxiety of it, yeah.
I think
We
that
want to, go ahead.
this is Trustee Lanfear. I think I have to call on, it's been 25 years that I've been involved with village government, a little bit longer now. And in that time, and during the courses of the election cycles, one thing always came through to me, especially when we discussed the litigation with 75 Monroe and so forth, is that all of the people that I spoke with as villagers, the village was their number one priority, keeping it intact as a village and not having it disappear. That when we had to engage in lawsuits, we had Phil Sutherland High School with supporters, even though they knew that it was going to incur expense to the village. It came through loud and clearly that their love from the village was tantamount in their why they lived here. And so I am taking that as affirmation of their mindset. I understand that it's difficult. It's going to be difficult for me personally to incur this. SJ's is closed, one of the first fatalities to go on Main Street. I can say that now because it was made official the other day. And I think there will probably be others behind it. And so I'm not saying this from a I understand it's affecting all of us. But the village is like a family member. And I think all of us who live here, and especially if we spend a lot of time, understand this, and we put it as a priority. And that's what I'm trying to do. There may be, I understand, not everybody feels the same way, but I'm trying to base it on my experience and the number of people I've spoken to over my 25 plus years. Thank you.
Well, I think I would add to that, Lily, that the village is an extraordinary place. You know, I've been in almost every village in New York State. There's only a handful that have the sense of community and the quality of the environment that we have here. We have a precious resource here that we are stewards of. And part of our financial responsibility here is to ensure that we continue to maintain resources that protect, preserve, and enhance what's so meaningful to all of us, which is this venue that allows community gathering, socializing, and a sense of community. And I think of any suburb I've ever been to, Pittsford has the strongest sense of community, and that's why I love living here, and that's why I've loved serving as mayor.
Great. Do we want to open, we have a number of callers on. Do we want to open it up to input or questions?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Will we all be able to hear if they speak?
Yes, you would be. We only have one comment so far. Dave Ferris made a comment here, need to explain 15% of tax increase is directly related to sales tax loss, which we do not control. I think the board has covered that, but if someone wants to comment.
It's an important point, and I think it is fundamental to our discussion here. Part of the difficulty in budgeting is that currently property tax is only 50% of our revenue. So we only have 50% of our revenue that we have direct control over. And that's always been a challenge in budgeting, because if you raise taxes 10%, you don't necessarily increase revenues by 10%.
Okay, if any of the residents want to comment, they
Yeah,
can
if anyone would
send me
like
a
to
chat.
chime in, you are welcome to do so. Okay.
Want me to unmute people?
I think I saw Mark's hand go up. Could you unmute Mark Harrington?
I got it, Dorothy.
He's open. Mark, you're open. No,
Mark, you're
he's
on.
lost him.
Okay. I'll just tell you, going to your lawyer situation, over the, I don't know, 40 years that I've run my own stuff, I've had to spend a lot of money on lawyers. That's with no one suing me, which they never have. But it's with me having to go after people that were just not up to snuff. I think what you said, Bob, makes a lot of sense, that when you get into litigation, it's why I hate it. You never know how it's going to blow up. And that is the hardest part of predicting what your legal expenses are. Where you are now, you should be able to get a pretty good read on. And I don't think you can blame the lawyers necessarily, because you were in a different phase in that litigation process. And then the other thing I just throw out there, which you also touched on, there's the federal government spent $3 trillion in a matter of a few months, and it's because no one knows how bad this is going to be, but it's going to be really bad. And all of the politicians are saying it's going to be fine. You can't count on that. So I think what you guys are doing in terms of over budgeting for this, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. This is just my only 2 comments.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. I just want to make sure that if we do get a surplus, that it's not used as a windfall, that it's used in a responsible manner.
I think we all agree with that, Dan.
I think we all agree with that, yes.
I won't try to articulate anything.
Only other,
What he said was what I was trying to say earlier.
You
I'm
did
bad
fine.
at extemporaneous speaking.
We
All right.
we all understood you. Who else? Would anyone else like to speak?
we had a comment from caller 2 that said, well said, Ms. Lampier. And is there any others?
Okay, given the conversation we've had tonight, would someone like to make a motion?
Are we clear? Why don't you make the motion, Bob? As I'm not even certain that we decided on a,
Well, if I make a motion,
Sure.
I'm gonna make a motion for $4.72 per thousand.
okay, this is trustee
Bob,
Lanfair. I
there's,
will second that. Go ahead.
Bob,
I seconded that.
there's something clean about, we're being told it's a 20% tax hit, and therefore we're raising in accordance 20%.
Do you want to propose 20%, Dan?
No, I don't want to propose that because I won't vote for it.
Well, then
Then why did you say it, Dan?
that's right. Then they-
Somebody else
say
would
it.
propose it, and
No.
I would still vote no on it.
Okay, all right.
I-
Oh,
All right.
no help.
Any discussion on, we have a motion on the floor. Any discussion?
So to be clear, sorry, that's my dog scratching himself. Can you hear that? Knuckles,
We
you're
can.
okay, buddy.
Knuckles, knock it off.
My question is, are we voting on a budget or are we just voting on changing this line item? What are we voting on right now?
Well, I was making a motion that we vote to establish a tax rate of $4.72 per thousand. That is my motion. Including adding, as you proposed, Dan, $25,000 to the Hodgson Russ category.
Thank you.
And
This
that
is trustee
includes the
Lanfair.
other-
I will second that motion. Did Renee had something?
I was just making sure that that includes the other discussion we had with the bridge lighting and moving those line items as well.
Amended according to Renee's addition.
But we're not actually voting on the budget until we know what the Hudson Russ payment schedule is. When do we actually vote on the budget?
That's independent, so we can vote on the budget. We're going to work out a schedule with Hodgson Russ, but that doesn't affect what's allocated and what will reflect in the budget for 2020, 2021. So that's an independent track.
So would somebody answer the question, are we voting on the budget now or are we just changing that one line item?
Well, I don't see a reason why. I think we're at the end of the road here. I think we've exhausted every opportunity, and I would make a motion to approve a budget with the tax rate I proposed.
We need a little more clarification. Trustee Galusha here. If we add the 25,000 to the Hudson Russ legal projection, we're still with a negative fund balance. And so we're going to have to address that issue before we talk about the
Mary,
budget.
can you comment on that?
Well,
Not at the moment because my head is spinning.
okay, but guys, hold on a minute. I would think we would not vote on a final budget right now because we don't have a document in front of us that has all the right numbers in it.
So we would, what this motion is to develop a new budget utilizing the 4.72 tax rate.
Mhm.
And then Mary would present us with a balanced budget.
Right.
Okay.
And we would review that budget. And at the next meeting, we would then potentially vote on that budget because we must have it completed before May 1st.
That is correct.
That's right.
And the next meeting is when?
28th.
April 20,
Tuesday.
Tuesday. At 4:30, right?
no, that's at 6 o'clock.
6
Our
o'clock.
regular meeting.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock on the 20th.
Yeah. Should we all talk at you at once, Dan?
I can only hear one of you. It doesn't matter. You can all talk to me at once.
We're gonna have to yell. Not a skill I have. Oh,
Oh,
there's the
he's a
dog.
cutie
Hi,
face.
Knuckle.
Okay, the 20, I would be adding an additional 25,000 into the Hudson line. The balance of it would go into a contingency at the moment? Is that it?
No, I don't think that's what we wanted.
I think, Mary,
General
you
fund,
said,
right?
All of it would go into the Hudson line?
I think Frank is concerned about the fund
General
balance. Is
fund.
that correct,
Fund
Frank?
balance.
What we would, excuse me again, trustee Galusha here. If we raise the legal fee for Hudson Russ, that would bring them up to 50,000. And that would increase our shortfall 29,133. So what we'd have to do in order to have a balanced budget is to take 29,133 and add that into the amount that we want to negotiate with the lawyers as part of the payment plan. That way we'd have a balanced budget. And then by next week, perhaps we could come up with a payment as far as what we would be paying them over what period of time, because we have to decide that yet.
Correct, correct. Are you in agreement with that, Mary?
I'm in agreement. I'll
Okay.
run the new numbers tomorrow and we'll see where this sifts out. The 18% is giving us a total of 60,000 additional dollars. Taking away the 25 additional off the expense, or I should say onto the expense for Hudson, the balance to be decided after we look at these numbers again. But technically, they're
So-
going to legal expenses.
Okay, so potentially there will be $25,000 to go into the general fund.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And yes, I know this is a public meeting, and yes, I know that it's a public document, but please, nobody tell Hudson Russ that they have 50 to spend, because they'll find a way to spend it.
No, nobody's
Too
gonna do
late, they can tune into this.
well, they
But I
haven't.
just
They
said-
haven't. They're not gonna know. Okay,
right,
we
well-
have a motion on the floor. Dorothea, would you call for a vote?
You're
We
muted.
can't
Bill.
hear you, Dorothea. You're
muted.
muted.
Sorry. Trustee Keating,
No.
Mayor Corby,
Yes.
Trustee Lampier,
Lanfear, aye.
Trustee Stetser,
that's her, aye.
Trustee Galusha.
Trustee Galusha, aye.
That motion
Carried.
passes.
Okay,
So we have one more meeting to go, and we make our final decision at that meeting.
correct. Correct. Okay, thank you, everyone. Let's move on and go to and we'll have to ask all of our friends to leave us. I'll make a motion to enter executive session to discuss pending litigation.
I'll make
I'm
a
no
second to
longer
that
needed
motion.
also, right?
Thank you very
Dan, do
much,
you have-
Mary.
Thanks,
Before we
Mary.
leave here, do you have an alternate proposal for a budget since you voted against that? Do you have an alternate proposal?
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
Yes.
And your proposal is?
To not raise taxes and to cut the budget.
And
Bob,
how would
I'm
you,
not
how
running-
would you do that?
Bob, I'm not running for office, okay? I'm not gonna vote. My vote is no. You're gonna say whatever you want out in the world, you go for it, okay? Jesus.
No, I think that's a valid
Okay,
question.
now let's get-
Dan.
Guys, you're not gonna agree with me, okay? We don't agree. It's fine that we don't agree. I am not going to vote to raise taxes during a pandemic. I think there's more we could cut. I've tried over and over and over again to talk about furloughs and layoffs, and nobody wants to talk about it. So you guys are voting one way, I'm voting another way, move on.
So you have no alternative proposal.
I have an alternative proposal, and I've made that clear several times. You just don't like the alternative proposal.
Well, it wasn't viable. We evaluated the
Bob?
previous
Bob?
proposal.
Bob, that's your opinion. My
Now-
opinion is the current budget is not the right way to go. And that's why we vote, and we vote differently, and it's fine. Let's move on.
Trustee Galusha here. We voted on the proposals that you made, Dan, or we actually considered the three proposals that you made. Furloughs is a new one, but we voted on the treasurer issue that we can't do that. We voted on on cutting one person from DPW, and you agreed with that we could not do that. And the other one is still an open position that we haven't decided on. So those were the three that you proposed. I don't remember you proposing any more. Furloughs is a new one, but I don't see how you would propose that. I mean, how would you furlough people? Who would you furlough? Where would you do it? How would you do it? You just can't say, well, I proposed furloughs without anything to substantiate it.
As
I mean,
said
if you
earlier-
do that, if
Frank,
you do
guys,
that,
guys,
I could
guys.
propose a lot of ways that we could cut
Guys.
the budget, but they're not possible.
Guys, we disagree. It's okay. It's okay. All right?
But
I really
but
don't
please-
think the ways
please-
you guys have made it
please
clear.
answer the question. Who would we furlough? What are you proposing?
Guys, I don't have all the information on what our costs are on unemployment. I told you earlier in this call that I've reached out to NICOM. They gave a garbage answer. And I've done my own research, and I don't have all the facts yet. And it's a waste of my breath because you guys already like the budget. You're going to go with it the way it is.
I take issue with the like. I'd like you to,
You're
Understand that
voting
nobody
yes
likes
on the
it.
budget. You're
No, I
voting
think-
yes on the budget.
Trustee
You're voting
Galusha
yes
here.
on the budget, but you don't like it. I'm voting no on
That's
the
correct.
budget. You're not going to talk me out of it. You're not. I think it's. Look, we disagree. It's fine. You guys want me to put together a proposal on something that you are not going to agree to. Why would I do that? So
Trustee
you can
Galusha.
prove a political point out there. Who cares? We disagree.
Trustee Galusha here. Dan, you've said that many times that you are able to, that you know how we're going to act. You know how we're going to vote. You are projecting what we're going to do. Well, I object to that. I object to that. Thus far this evening, we've had a very constructive conversation. All of us have talked about issues, and it's been very constructive. Now we're voting on the budget, and you're voting no. And a question is, why? And you're not proposing anything as to why.
I've now answered this several times. We disagree. Let's move on.
You haven't answered
guys
it though.
guys-
What is your answer?
My answer is to look at layoffs, to examine layoffs so that we don't have to raise taxes on our unemployed villagers.
So
That's
how
a
much-
very good, that's
how
a
much
very
money
good
would we
concept,
save?
but
And would we lay off?
But who would we lay off? Have you thought about who we would lay off? Because I have. We have thought about it before. We've talked about letting one person go from the DPW, and you agreed that we couldn't do that. Okay, so what's next? The office people? Is that what you're talking about? Lay off somebody from the office? Who would you lay off? That's all I'm asking. This isn't an argument. I just want to know, what are your ideas?
Thank you. Shall we go to executive session?
Dan, you're gonna bring the numbers for the, the furlough or the unemployment numbers with you, so at least we can look at it next time.
If I have good information, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right, let's move on to executive session.
We
I'll
have
make a
two,
motion.
Hold on, I gotta
Wait.
we have to eliminate people in the room.
yeah, we've got two callers that are still on that aren't,
Can we ask you, callers, I'm sorry, can we ask you to leave so we can enter executive session to discuss pending litigation?
I can just kick them out.
Mary or
Just
Yeah.
dismissed one.
okay,
Yeah.
or- yeah. I
I'm
meant
working on it and I'm gonna lock the room. Give me a
Okay.
second.
I just,
Thanks, Dorothea.
Yep, I just wanna make sure I got
So,
everything.
Dorothea, I'll let you know when we adjourn the meeting. I'll send you an email and who made the motion, because we have to come back into, right?
Okay,
We
I'm
have to re-enter.
gonna, then,
So I'll send you an
On that room.
email saying who made the
well,
motion.
all right, I'm gonna stop the recording.